A branch cracked from the path that wound slightly downward and to the left. The rhythmic thud of footfalls slowly grew, and a sliver of torchlight flickered between the dark tangle of branches. A horse whinnied. Straining to see, Zodak finally spotted a figure, then a second, and a third. As the group approached, Zodak could make out a cloaked rider sitting aside a stately black horse with a coat that shimmered in the moonlight. Affixed to the horse's head was a black iron headpiece, like a skull. 3 men trudged beside the rider, brandishing weapons and carrying torches. Zodak's heart stopped. Behind the 4 men, ghosted at the edge of the torchlight, loomed 2 hulking shapes. They stood as tall as 2 soldiers and moved like men underwater, their huge frames towering over the others. "Boss," the short man let out a gasp. Zodak had heard ancient stories of giants, 60, 70, 80 measures tall, tossing horse carts as a child might toss blocks. These grotesque beasts were something different altogether. They were wrapped in tattered black and grey from neck to toe, with full-sized swords dangling like whittling knives from thick belts that crossed their massive chests and waists. Knotted hair hung like swamp vines. Behind the giants came 2 more men. As they approached, Zodak beheld the full group for the first time. He had thought the scarred man and his companions grimy, yet these men were twice as filthy and wretched. The men on foot wore tattered black jackets, each more ragged than the next. Their faces were tattooed with strange markings, and rings and chains hung from noses and ears. A sour odor seeped into the glen ahead of the procession. Something is terribly wrong. "We brought the child," said the scarred man as the convoy came to a stop and squared off with the trio. A hand clamped on Zodak's arm. "This can't be the Elders' convoy, can it? No, this is all wrong. What has Allah done?" The voice inside rose to a panicked shout. The dark man yanked Zodak forward. He tried to pull back, but the scarred man grabbed his other arm and they dragged him before the group. Zodak shriveled under the gaze of this horrible company. The man on the horse wore a sleek black robe, its hood shadowing his face. Moonlight glinted from the shards of gems and jewels embedded in the back of his hands. He drew back his hood, and Zodak gasped. His captors drew back a half step as well. The rider's weathered bald head shimmered dully, and his gaunt face was decorated with more rings and chains and gems than all the others. Sunken black eyes roved over the group. Beneath his heavy, arched nose, his slit of a mouth ran across his face and opened into gaping blackness as he spoke. "Is this the one?" "Yes, we brought him as agreed," said the scarred man. "Son of the Shielder." "Are you sure this is him?" croaked the rider again. "We took the one you asked," replied the scarred man. "Where's the gold?" Zodak's stomach knotted. He had been tricked, deceived. "Allah!" It was too much. His vision danced, and his legs threatened to collapse. The bald rider threw a pouch at the scarred man. "It feels light," said the scarred man, testing the satchel's weight in his hand. "There's the half. The other half when we have the Shielder." "What in the downs is he talking about?" snapped the short man to the scarred man. "The deal was for the boy," said the scarred man, his voice rising. The grip on Zodak tightened. "What's happening? What deal?" Zodak's heart thundered in his chest. "The boy's just bait," the rider hissed. "These shirking moth," grumbled the short man under his breath. "We can't know if the Shielder will come," the scarred man protested. "Not to worry, Eirik," snorted the bald man. "He'll come. We're told he's departed already." "The deal was for the boy, Gris," repeated Eirik. "Pay us our due now, or what?" challenged Gris, moving his horse a step closer and letting a spiked ball and chain fall to his side. The men behind Gris drew weapons, and in a flash Eirik and his 2 companions had blades drawn as well. Zodak felt a sharp point under his chin. "Or you don't get what you came for," threatened Eirik. One of the giants moved forward, lugging a huge, black, angular blade over his shoulder. Gris held up a hand, and the giant froze. "You'll be digging your grave. Or maybe Drogoth would save you for the plunge. Might still have use for the dead boy, too." The dark man hissed something urgent to Eirik. "This ain't what I signed on for, boss." The short man's voice quaked. Eirik spun on the short man, hate wild in his eyes. "What did I say?" He groped roughly for the short man's collar and lifted a clenched fist high overhead. "I am here for the boy!" A strong voice shattered the night. Eirik froze, his head cocked as the short man wriggled from his grasp. There stood Arden, alone in the road beside Sal. The Poldak riders hissed to each other. "Right on cue," croaked Gris. "Stop! It's a trap!" Zodak yelled. "We're not going to Poldak! They're not from the Elder!" "Quiet, boy!" Eirik struck Zodak on the head, sending searing pain over his scalp. "Zodak," Arden's voice was pained. "These men are child stealers." For a moment, Zodak couldn't make sense of the words, his brain struggling for their meaning. Eirik hissed a command to the dark man. Zodak's legs became wobbly, and his mouth filled with a metallic taste, nausea hitting him like a punch to the gut. Eirik held him tight as he swayed, gasping for breath. Suddenly it all came into perfect focus. The grimy men, the slippery hissing tongue, the horse brand. He had seen that symbol before. That was no man in a circle. It was a child in a net. Zodak struggled to twist out of the hold, but Eirik's grip was like iron. "You're far from home, old man," the dark man spoke, and his companion shuffled beside him. "Crossed into the wrong clearing, you did. And now you're gonna— You let my boy go!" roared Arden.